The most powerful character you've never heard of is this guy. His name is Bogard. Say hi to Bogard, considering this is probably the first time you're consciously meeting him. Bogard is an enigma of One Piece. One of the biggest mysteries that almost nobody ever talks about. People are always so concerned with stuff like, what is the One Piece? Where's that final mystery cube? And why does Nami's chest keep expanding? When will it stop? Are they like balloons? Are they going to burst? You know, the basic surface level mysteries. So let's put all of those aside for now and step into something truly wild. This is the Bogard Enigma. Bogard is/was, and it's kind of hard to tell, but he was at one stage Garp's right-hand man. Amongst the Marines, he is seemingly Garp's most trusted direct subordinate. I mean, there are other Marines like Suru and Sengoku who are probably more trusted, but that's because they're Garp's contemporaries. Bogard's design is thought to be based on Humphrey Bogart's character of Rick Blaine from Casablanca. Hence the name Bogard, because that sounds kind of like Bogart. Although, does it? Because even something as simple as his name is bogged down in this thick expanse of mystery swamp. But we'll get to that later. Bogard has been Garp's second in command for at least 27 years, because he appeared in One Piece Chapter 0, the ever so special chapter released for Strong World, telling the canon story of Golden Lion Shiki. In the manga, he's a bit difficult to spot as per usual, but he appears in two panels. One when Garp is meeting with Fleet Admiral Kong, and another when Garp's forces are setting sail to intercept Shiki and Roger. However, in the anime adaptation, Episode 0, he's much easier to see. However, his outfit is more like a dark turquoise as opposed to his modern day brown, thus indicating that Bogard had a mild hint of flair in his younger days. Interestingly, in Chapter 0, Bogard has a counterpart as well. There is a second Marine with a similar outfit who accompanies Garp. This Marine is present in both the anime and the manga, however said Marine is never seen again in either medium. Curious, very mildly curious. Some say that Bogard had him dealt with as a power play to get closer to Garp, whilst others say that it was something that was not that. However, Bogard himself makes his first appearance in Chapter 92 of the series, thus making him a classic East Blue character. Vice Admiral Garp arrives to escort former Captain Morgan to prison, and it should be noted that at this time, we had no idea that Garp held even a modicum of importance in the grand scheme of things, much less that he was related to Luffy. But Bogard is with Garp as his second in command, and when Morgan injures Garp, Bogard immediately draws his sword. However, before Bogard can strike Morgan down, Morgan takes Helmeppo hostage. Bogard then, rather brutally, orders the Marines to fire on Morgan, which would injure if not kill Helmeppo as well, thus calling into question why he bothered to stop when Helmeppo was taken hostage. Bogard could have just cut them both down right then and there. Yet another Bogardian sub-mystery. But Kobe's sense of justice drives him to stand in the way of the cannon, which is actually very early foreshadowing for what he would eventually do at Marineford blocking Admiral Akainu. And you can see at this very moment that Bogard is shook, which I point out because it's one of the rare displays of actual emotion we have from Bogard. Bogard then proceeds to instantly slice, or perhaps more accurately, dice Kobe's guns into these teeny tiny itty bits, thus showing us that this guy man, he is no joke. Legitimately one of the most skilled, if not outright most powerful swordsmen in the world. When it comes to sharp metal objects, there is a bit of misinformation on the internet that Bogard has a Mato blade, and you know what? Maybe he does. It certainly does look impressive, but the sword has never been named, much less graded. In any case, where were we? Right, Bogard is gonna kill Kobe. However, before the situation escalates, Garp wakes up. That's how Morgan injured him, by the way. Garp fell asleep. The situation resolves itself, and then Garp decides to personally train Kobe and Helmeppo, which very much includes Bogard. In fact, the very last shot of the cover story is Kobe and Helmeppo undergoing sword-based training with Bogard. Kobe, of course, went on to follow more in Garp's footsteps as a hand-to-hand fighter. However, with this in mind, it's very likely that Bogard is Helmeppo's mentor because he primarily uses blades. And given that he was one of their main instructors, you could also assume that Bogard knows the Rokushiki techniques as well, which were the 6 powers demonstrated by CP9, of which both Kobe and Helmeppo picked up a couple, if not all of them. Skipping ahead, when Garp arrives on Water 7 through a wall, Bogard is right behind him in his standard formation, behind Garp, always backing up the rear and ensuring the safety of Monkey D. Grandad's posterior, because the official hierarchy goes a little something like this. We've got Garp, then Bogard, then Garp Snacks, then Kobe, and then if there's time, Helmeppo. And despite having existed for 7 years at this point, this is also Bogard's first speaking line, where he says, "That's not an excuse, sir, so let's just say they got away." This was in response to Garp deciding not to capture Luffy because he was his grandson, in an act of sheer nepotism, which means that Bogard either has a similar sense of justice to Garp, or that over the last 3 decades, Bogard has simply resigned himself to the fact that Garp is going to do whatever he wants, and so he facilitates that. So at this point, Bogard is Garp's co-conspirator. He's later seen on Garp's battleship with the rest of the Garp squad, Kobe, Helmeppo, and Kuzan, and seeing Kuzan here, it hurts a little bit in retrospect, you bad Marine man. But this is where the mystery intensifies, because this panel marks the disappearance of Bogard. Garp goes on to appear a lot, so does Kobe, as does Helmeppo, but there is zero trace of Bogard whatsoever. Garp's second in command, Kobe and Helmeppo's mentor. What happened to Bogard? And the place where you'd most expect to see him next is Marineford, mainly because Bogard is a Marine. And we saw almost every active Marine in the series up until this point at the Paramount War, with the exception, I would go so far as to say, the sole exception, that is Bogard. He's not the sole exception, I know there are others, but it just sounds better dramatically. One potential explanation for this is that Garp took a very passive role during the Paramount War, and Bogard is only ever really seen supporting Garp. So with Garp's narrative role here, Oda may have simply forgotten to include Bogard elsewhere, because he is a painfully minor character with exactly 1 line of dialogue to date. He also goes on to not appear with Garp in various flashbacks, of which we have 3. We see Garp meeting with Roger, and I think that's fair enough. This was a private moment between old rival chums after all. We also see Garp going to Batarilla to pick up Ace from Rouge, and I think this is also fair enough. You wouldn't want to draw too much suspicion by having old mate Bogard tag along. And we also see Garp dropping Luffy off with Dadan, which is the kind of stuff that he does in his spare time. Bogard wouldn't be on duty with Garp. But look, all of these excuses aside, I am beginning to question whether or not Bogard ever existed in the first place. And what happened to Bogard is only the opening mystery. Because question, what is his name? Because that's a very interesting thing about Bogard. His name is often incorrectly assumed to be Humphrey Bogard within the fan base due to the actor resemblance. However, not only has Humphrey never been mentioned in any canon material, but neither has the name Bogard. This is a very bizarre case for One Piece. Bogard has never been named in the manga or in any of the extended manga materials. This includes data books and even the latest Viviacard data book. And almost every character in the series is named in those. For example, who remembers Poppy? She was the Kuja tribe member fighting in the Kuja arena during the Amazon Lily introductory montage. And as a side note, in the anime, she really does look like a budget Boa Hancock, like the kind of Boa Hancock you'd make in a character creation screen of a game before you get all of the OP gear. But even then, Poppy has an entry in the Viviacard databook, as does Faust, a mink cat from North Blue, who was part of the Hawkins Pirates and allegedly served as the crew magician, which is pretty cool. But all of this is information that we only know because Faust has a databook entry. Even Fishwoman Nami has a databook entry, and I don't mean the real one that we saw in the Otohime flashback, I mean the drawing that Luffy made after Baratie. So the fictional character is logged, yet Bogard is not. So how do we even know his name? Well, the honest answer to that is that we don't. The name Bogard could be entirely incorrect. But this all came about because back in the day, the anime used to actually animate the cover stories. And Diary of Kobe Meppo, as the very second cover story, was part of this. The cover story was adapted into 2 episodes, which meant the dialogue not only had to be written, but also performed. And so a voice actor was cast for the character, but this character still had no name. And he wasn't a random background Marine either. In fact, in these episodes, he had a more prominent role than Garp did. And so the anime staff gave him a name. And to this day, the only time that this name has ever been mentioned is in the anime credits, where he is labeled as Bogard. As far as we know, this name might be completely different in the manga. But in the anime, Bogard is also depicted as a skilled sharpshooter. He even gives these painfully detailed instructions to the Marines to fire the cannon in order to hit Morgan and Helmeppo. Also, another slight difference here. In the anime, Kobe doesn't have his guns, and I'm not sure why. It may have been seen as too violent for a very child-looking Kobe to be wielding wielding these pistols wildly. But as a result of that, there's nothing for Bogard to cut. So Bogard doesn't even get to display his sword skills, meaning that whilst anime Bogard has 100% more name, this comes at the cost of 100% less action. Bogard does, however, threaten to cut Kobe down when he doesn't move, thus painting him as very similar to Admiral Akainu, who decided to kill Kobe when he didn't move out of his way at Marineford. So anime Bogard is pretty ruthless. But what gives him that right? Because we don't even know his rank. Bogard's Marine rank has never been revealed. And just like his absence from the data books, this is crazy, because even the most obscure Marines have assigned ranks, like say Chief Petty Officer Mashikaku, whose biggest claim to fame was once walking behind Smoker and Toshigi when the Marines gathered at Marineford. He's sort of like an extra who was lucky enough to be standing behind the lead in a shot that made the film. But my point is, if this guy gets a rank, in fact a rank and a name, then why doesn't Bogard? Especially since Bogard, by the way he's dressed, he seems to look pretty high up there. We have a baseline for his rank because Bogard is allowed to wear his jacket in the special Marine-y way, where it somehow sits on your back without the arms in the holes, and the lowest Marine rank we've seen do this is the captain level. However, Bogard could be as high as Vice Admiral, because standard Vice Admiral attire is of course a nice suit, a jacket on top, and specifically blue epaulets, although this is also consistent with the attire of many Rear Admirals. Another option is that Bogard isn't part of the standard Marine hierarchy at all, and instead he could be one of the support staff. Sengoku is a good example of a current support staff member with the rank of Inspector General, but the most common support rank is Instructor, which is what Garp is now and also what the non-canon Zephyr was. And given everything we know, Bogard is potentially an Instructor because all we've ever really seen him do is instruct. And that might also explain why he wasn't fighting at the Paramount War, because he wasn't infantry or an officer. He was support. But as a Marine, it's also very difficult to determine Bogard's judicial preferences. His initial appearance in both the manga and the anime, but more so in the anime, put him very much in the camp of absolute justice, because he was willing to kill Helmeppo to ensure the justice of Morgan not escaping. A very similar philosophy to killing citizens to ensure that no pesky scholars escape from a certain island. Also, in the manga, it's Garp that stops Bogard from going further, whereas in the anime, Kobe jumps off the ship before Garp wakes up. Either way, Bogard was gonna do some damage to Kobe. However, it's very hard to believe that someone so extreme could be Garp's trusted subordinate for so long. So you kind of have to assume that Bogard might have this rough, justicey exterior, but with a warm, comforting moral filling. However, this question did lead to a rather dark theory. The reason why we haven't seen Bogard since Water 7 is because he defected and became a believer of absolute justice. So in all of Garp's subsequent appearances, he's been missing his right-hand man because that man is now the right-hand man of a different man, a more magma man. However, that doesn't explain why Bogard hasn't appeared anywhere else though. It's not just an issue that he's been missing from Garp's appearances, it's that Bogard is nowhere at all. And the leading theory for this is simply that Oda forgot. But I don't think so. And I think that way because of reasons. Firstly, Oda went to the effort of including Bogard in Chapter 0, which was published long after Water 7. In fact, it was while Marineford was being serialized, which is curious. Why not include Bogard in the Paramount War? Because Oda clearly remembered he existed during this time. But Oda's memory also served him well during the special film Z color spread that appeared with Chapter 691. This depicts every Marine in the series to date as rookies, and that includes a certain Bogard. This was made on the border between Punk Hazard and Dressrosa, so again, Oda clearly remembered Bogard well into the New World era. I imagine that Bogard's role may have changed as a result of Garp's resignation, remembering that Garp is now an instructor, so Bogard may have been reassigned elsewhere. But where is that elsewhere? Is elsewhere anywhere? What happened to Bogard? I, man on the internet, need to know. Well, luckily for us, this mystery finally has an answer. A whopping 17 years after his last canon appearance, Bogard finally made a return to the manga in chapter 1087. He was spotted on Garp's ship just behind Kujaku, and mostly obscured by a speech bubble, but here he is. After all this time, Bogard is still loyal to Garp. However, this panel is his only sighting. Bogard did not put his immense skills to use on Hachinosu, at least not that we saw, and with Garp's defeat, Bogard now remains Kobe and Helmeppo's sole mentor. And as for what the future holds for Bogard, it's very hard to tell. I mean, even fortune tellers usually need to at least know the name of their client before they start their assorted ramblings, and with Bogard, we don't even have that, which is why he is a true enigma of the series, a mystery that will linger long after the One Piece has been found. Powerful, yet reserved. Absolute injustice, but kind in person. Present, yet not present. Oda remembers him, but never uses him. And so Bogard is simply Bogard. Nothing more, nothing less, but also maybe nothing at all, but maybe, very maybe, absolutely everything.